Ford just turned its back on American workers, and Trump, he's ready for revenge. The company that once defined American manufacturing is moving production overseas, triggering a firestorm of backlash. But why? Ford says it had no choice. Soaring costs, supply chain nightmares, and an EV market on the brink of collapse. But now Trump's fighting back, pushing for tariffs that could destroy Ford's entire strategy. This is more than just a business move. It's a gamble that could reshape the entire industry. The question is, did Ford just save itself or dig its own grave? What's happening? A groundbreaking decision has just shaken the American auto industry, as one of its biggest players plans to shift a substantial share of electric vehicle production overseas, defying President Donald Trump's America First policies. For a company that has long been a symbol of American manufacturing, this decision is nothing short of explosive. The backlash was immediate and intense. Trump and his supporters reacted with fury, calling Ford's move a betrayal of American workers. Conservative media exploded with outrage, with commentators accusing Ford of abandoning its patriotic roots in favor of corporate greed. Across social media, the hashtag #BoycottFord began trending within hours, with consumers vowing to never buy a Ford vehicle again. But Ford insists that it had no choice. Company executives argue that rising production costs, tariffs on raw materials, and global supply chain pressures forced their hand. Ford's CEO framed the decision as a strategic move for long-term survival, ensuring that the company remains competitive in the evolving electric vehicle market. Now, the big question is, did Ford just make a calculated business decision to secure its future, or did it just commit corporate suicide? The stakes couldn't be higher. As the controversy reached a boiling point, Trump himself took action, and he was ready to make Ford pay for its decision. But Ford's troubles didn't stop there. Trump's response was swift, brutal, and could turn this corporate gamble into a political disaster. Trump's furious response. If Ford thought it could make this move without consequences, it severely underestimated Trump. The president responded swiftly and aggressively, launching a full-scale counterattack against the automaker. Within hours of Ford's announcement, Trump called for an immediate boycott of the company. Speaking at a rally in Michigan, he slammed Ford's leadership, accusing them of turning their backs on the very workers who built the company. He urged his supporters to buy American, but not from Ford. But Trump didn't stop at words. He took real action. The White House announced that it was reviewing a new set of tariffs that would directly target automakers outsourcing production overseas. The plan was to impose a massive tax penalty on any car company that moved jobs away from American soil. If implemented, these tariffs could cripple Ford's strategy, forcing the company to either reverse course or absorb enormous financial losses. Trump's allies in Congress quickly backed his plan, calling for severe restrictions on companies that take manufacturing jobs out of the country. Conservative governors in states with major Ford plants denounced the automaker, warning that the company's decision could lead to job cuts and economic instability. The pressure on Ford continued to mount, with some investors questioning whether the company's leadership had miscalculated the political consequences. Could Ford afford to take on the full weight of Trump's economic war machine? But what if Ford never had a real choice? Beneath all the political noise, a hidden crisis forced Ford into this desperate move. The real reason Ford did this. Behind all the headlines and political outrage, there's a much bigger story, one that Ford's leadership has been dealing with behind closed doors for years. The truth is, this isn't just about outsourcing jobs or corporate greed, it's about survival. Ford is facing a crisis that no one is talking about: the skyrocketing cost of electric vehicle production in the United States. While the shift to electric vehicles has been marketed as the future, building those vehicles in America is becoming unsustainable. The biggest challenge is battery production. The most expensive part of an electric vehicle is its battery, and the critical materials needed, lithium, cobalt, and nickel, are controlled almost entirely by foreign markets. The United States does not have the infrastructure to mine and refine these materials at scale. As a result, American automakers are forced to import these resources at high costs, and Trump's tariffs on foreign imports have only made the situation worse. Ford had two choices. It could keep production in the United States and accept financial losses, leading to higher car prices that would make Ford's electric vehicles less competitive than those from Tesla, General Motors, and foreign automakers. The other option was to move production to lower-cost regions, secure cheaper access to raw materials, and ensure Ford remains a major player in the electric vehicle revolution. Ford chose the second option, a ruthless but necessary business move. But the gamble is enormous. If this decision backfires, it could destroy Ford's reputation and shake consumer confidence in the brand. But what if Ford isn't just trying to survive? What if this is part of a much bigger plan, one that could reshape the entire auto industry? The billion-dollar gamble. Company executives argue that this move goes beyond mere cost-cutting. It is a calculated strategy. Rather than just offshoring jobs, they are repositioning the company to lead the global electric vehicle market. Ford sees a future where China and Europe are leading the electric vehicle revolution, while the United States is falling behind. To compete, Ford needs to play on the world stage, not just cater to U.S. politics. By moving electric vehicle production overseas, Ford is lowering production costs, allowing it to sell cheaper electric vehicles and compete with Tesla and Chinese brands like BYD. The company is also gaining direct access to global battery supply chains, reducing dependency on U.S. tariffs and regulations. In the long term, this move positions Ford to lead in electric vehicle innovation while staying ahead of the competition. However, this strategy comes with a massive risk. If American consumers turn their backs on Ford, the company could lose its home market, which has always been its foundation for success. Additionally, Ford is placing a bet on global electric vehicle growth. But if demand slows down, it could be left with billions in losses and no way to recover. The ultimate high-stakes question remains: is Ford about to win big and outmaneuver Trump, or has it just made the biggest mistake in its history? Ford's counterattack. Is it really doubling down on America? The backlash was fierce, with calls for boycotts, political retaliation, and economic penalties. But just when it seemed like Ford was on the defensive, the company launched a shocking counterattack, a sudden announcement of billions of dollars in new investments in the United States. In an official statement, Ford reaffirmed its commitment to American jobs, unveiling plans for multiple large-scale investments in domestic manufacturing. The company promised to expand EV production in Michigan, Kentucky, and Tennessee, creating thousands of jobs and boosting local economies. It also announced new initiatives to strengthen America's role in the global EV race, pledging to work with domestic suppliers to reduce dependence on foreign materials. But was this really part of Ford's long-term strategy? Or was it just a desperate move to do damage control? Critics immediately questioned the timing of the announcement. Why didn't Ford unveil these investments before the backlash? Some argued that this was a reactionary move designed to counter Trump's attack and calm public outrage. Others believed that Ford was playing a deeper game, using global expansion to reduce costs while keeping just enough production in America to maintain political favor. The company also worked aggressively to change the narrative. Ford's CEO took to the media, insisting that shifting production overseas did not mean abandoning America. The message was clear. Ford's global strategy was about survival, not disloyalty. But would this be enough to silence critics? Or would Ford's American investments be seen as nothing more than a PR stunt? But while Ford was trying to regain control of the situation, a much bigger problem loomed. One that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with global power: the EV supply chain war. The truth is, China controls the electric vehicle industry. It dominates battery production, raw material processing, and supply chains, leaving American automakers at its mercy. Even though the United States has access to lithium, cobalt, and other critical EV materials, it lacks the infrastructure to refine and process them at scale. That means American automakers must rely on China to supply the most important components of their EVs. Trump's America First policies were supposed to bring manufacturing back home, but in reality, they have complicated the situation for automakers. His administration's tariffs on Chinese imports and restrictions on global trade have raised production costs for American car companies, making it even harder for them to compete with foreign brands. Ford saw the writing on the wall. It knew that staying competitive in the EV market required cutting costs and securing supply chains. But with China controlling the world's battery production and the US government making it harder to import materials, Ford had to make a choice: play by the rules of a broken system or find a way to survive. By shifting production overseas, Ford is avoiding the high costs of producing EVs in the US while maintaining access to the global supply chain. But is this a smart move or a long-term risk? If Trump tightens trade restrictions even further, Ford could find itself in an even worse position, locked out of China's supply chain while facing tariffs at home. And Ford isn't alone. Every American automaker faces the same dilemma: either accept the harsh realities of global manufacturing or risk falling behind. But while Ford was scrambling to survive, one company saw an opportunity to strike. Tesla and other automakers react. As Ford fought to contain the political and economic fallout from its decision, Tesla wasted no time seizing the moment. While Ford's reputation took a hit, Tesla positioned itself as the true made-in-America automaker, doubling down on its US-based production. Elon Musk, never one to miss an opportunity, took to social media to highlight Tesla's commitment to American jobs. He posted about Tesla's fully US-based battery factories, contrasting them with Ford's controversial move. His message was clear: Tesla isn't abandoning America, Ford is. And it wasn't just rhetoric. Tesla announced plans to expand its gigafactories in Nevada and Texas, reinforcing its commitment to domestic production. Investors and consumers took notice, with some former Ford loyalists turning to Tesla instead. Meanwhile, other automakers watched Ford struggle with a mix of concern and opportunity. General Motors, Toyota, and Volkswagen remained quiet on the controversy, but behind the scenes, they strategized their next moves. General Motors, which had already faced backlash in the past for outsourcing, took a cautious approach, avoiding any public statements. Instead, it ramped up marketing efforts for its own electric vehicles, hoping to win over frustrated Ford customers. Toyota, which has historically been seen as an outsider in the US EV market, used Ford's crisis as a way to highlight its reliability. The company released new advertisements emphasizing quality and longevity, aiming to attract consumers worried about Ford's uncertain future. Volkswagen, one of the few foreign brands with a strong EV presence in the US, saw a golden opportunity. It quietly rolled out aggressive discounts on its electric models, targeting customers who might be second-guessing their loyalty to Ford. As Ford and Trump continued their high-stakes battle, the rest of the industry capitalized on the chaos. Some companies played it safe, while others took calculated risks to steal market share. But one thing became clear: Ford wasn't just fighting Trump, it was fighting for its survival. And the longer this war drags on, the more uncertain Ford's future becomes. The auto workers' revolt. Did Ford just spark a labor war? The real battle is now unfolding on the ground, inside Ford's own factories. The United Auto Workers, one of the most powerful labor unions in the country, is calling this move nothing short of a betrayal of American workers. For decades, Ford has relied on unionized American workers to build its reputation as an iconic U.S. automaker. The partnership between the company and its workers hasn't always been smooth, but now things are turning hostile. The UAW is furious, accusing Ford of turning its back on the very employees who made it successful. Union leaders are demanding higher wages, better job security, and strict guarantees that more jobs won't be shipped overseas. The fear inside Ford's American plants is growing. If the company is willing to move electric vehicle production abroad, what stops it from shifting more jobs in the future? The pressure is mounting. Some union leaders are already warning of a possible industry-wide strike. The last major strike by the UAW against Ford in 2019 cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars. A new strike at a time when Ford is already under attack from Trump and struggling to maintain consumer trust could be devastating. But it's not just about Ford. This fight could spill over to the entire auto industry. If the UAW moves forward with a strike, it could cripple production at General Motors, Stellantis, and other major automakers. That would not only hurt Ford's bottom line, but send shockwaves through the entire US economy. Ford is now in a no-win situation. If it gives in to union demands, it risks losing the cost-cutting advantage that came with shifting production overseas. But if it stands firm, it could face a massive worker revolt, production shutdowns, and even government intervention. But what if Ford's biggest problem isn't just a labor dispute? What if the real risk is that it follows in the footsteps of automakers that collapsed completely? What happens if Ford fails? Could it collapse like Pontiac and Saturn? If Ford gets this wrong, could it suffer the same fate as Pontiac and Saturn? In the early 2000s, General Motors made a series of risky bets. It tried to modernize its lineup, rebrand struggling brands, and adapt to shifting consumer demand. But instead of securing long-term growth, it miscalculated, overextended itself, and collapsed into bankruptcy by 2009. As a result, two of its most well-known brands, Pontiac and Saturn, were killed off entirely. At their peak, Pontiac and Saturn were thriving. Pontiac was once known for its muscle cars and performance models, while Saturn had a loyal following as a no-haggle, customer-friendly brand. But when General Motors started making desperate moves to cut costs, these brands lost their identity. Analysts warn that Ford could be heading down the same path. The company has already stopped production on the Fiesta, Focus, and Fusion, shifting its focus almost entirely to trucks and SUVs. If Ford's overseas strategy fails to deliver, some of its most recognizable models could be next on the chopping block. The risk isn't just about losing individual models. It's about losing the essence of what Ford represents. If Ford outsources too much, it could lose the trust of American consumers entirely. And once that trust is gone, it's nearly impossible to get back. Could Ford's best-selling F-Series trucks eventually face the same fate as Pontiac's Firebird or Saturn's Ion? Could Ford be making a mistake so severe that it leads to its slow decline? Or even an all-out collapse? But just when it seemed like Ford was on the verge of disaster, something unexpected happened. Despite all the backlash, Ford's global strategy actually started working. The unexpected twist. While Ford is facing a public relations nightmare in the United States, its global expansion is actually delivering real results. The company's electric vehicle sales are surging in overseas markets, especially in Europe and Asia, where EV adoption is happening much faster than in the US. Ford's new low-cost electric models are proving to be a hit in China, where EV demand is skyrocketing. In Germany and the United Kingdom, Ford's new battery plants are already increasing production, helping the company lower costs and boost profits. The numbers don't lie. Ford's strategy is working internationally. The company is seeing double-digit growth in EV sales overseas. And some analysts believe that Ford's future may lie outside of the US market entirely. But there's a huge problem. Back in the United States, Ford's reputation is crumbling. Consumer trust has plummeted to historic lows. Many Americans now see Ford as just another company that abandoned its workers, and Trump's campaign against the automaker is only making things worse. If Ford becomes too dependent on foreign markets, it could lose its grip on the American auto industry altogether. The company is walking a tightrope, balancing global success with domestic fallout. The question now is, can Ford maintain its newfound global strength while saving its reputation in the US? Or will it be forced to choose one over the other? But Ford's battle isn't over yet, because Trump is about to make his final move, and it could change everything. The final blow. Reports from inside the White House suggest that Trump is considering an all-out tariff war on automakers that move jobs overseas. If implemented, this policy would punish Ford and any other company that follows its lead. It would make it far more expensive for Ford to sell vehicles made overseas back into the American market, potentially wiping out the cost savings Ford hoped to gain. But that's not all. Trump is also hinting at new tax incentives for companies that build electric vehicles in the US. This could give Ford's competitors a major advantage, especially General Motors and Tesla, which are both expanding domestic EV production. If Ford doesn't reverse course, it could find itself boxed out of its home market entirely. Ford now faces a make-or-break moment. If it doubles down on its global expansion, it could continue growing internationally, but risk losing its standing as an American icon. If it backs down and tries to win back American consumers, it could salvage its brand, but at the cost of falling behind in the global EV race. The auto industry is watching closely. Ford's next move won't just determine its own fate, it could set the tone for the entire future of American manufacturing. What automakers can learn from the past. In the early 2000s, General Motors outsourced production to cut costs, but the move backfired, eroding consumer trust, increasing supply chain risks, and leading to a government bailout during the 2008 financial crisis. Chrysler faced a similar fate. To cut costs, it outsourced the production of key components to international suppliers in an effort to remain competitive against Japanese and German automakers. But instead of strengthening the brand, this move led to quality control issues, supply chain disruptions, and increasing financial instability. By 2009, Chrysler had collapsed into bankruptcy and was forced into a merger with Fiat to stay afloat. So, what makes Ford's situation different? The answer lies in timing and technology. Unlike General Motors and Chrysler, which primarily focused on internal combustion engine vehicles, Ford's move is happening during the electric vehicle revolution. The company is not just competing with traditional automakers, but with new industry disruptors, particularly from China. Ford's decision to outsource electric vehicle production now comes with even greater risks than past outsourcing failures. The global supply chain is already dominated by China, and Ford's move could further entrench foreign control over the future of American electric vehicles. But what if this is exactly what China wants? Could Ford's move actually help Chinese automakers take over the US market? China's rise. Did Ford just hand over the future of EVs? While Ford is struggling to defend its outsourcing decision, China's automakers are thriving. The country is no longer just a manufacturer for American and European brands. It has built its own electric vehicle giants that are now competing directly with Tesla, Ford, and General Motors. Chinese companies like BYD, NIO, and XPeng are rapidly expanding their influence, offering cheaper, high-tech electric vehicles that are attracting global buyers. BYD, which is backed by Warren Buffett, has already outsold Tesla in total electric vehicle sales, proving that China is not just competing, it is leading. Ford's decision to move electric vehicle production overseas could unintentionally accelerate China's dominance by shifting its supply chain and production to foreign markets. Ford may weaken its own position in the US market while giving Chinese automakers a competitive edge. The more China controls the production of electric vehicles and batteries, the harder it will be for American automakers to catch up. The biggest concern is China's grip on battery production. More than 80% of the world's lithium-ion batteries are made in China. Even Ford's new battery partnerships still depend on Chinese manufacturers for raw materials and production. This means that even as Ford builds electric vehicles, China holds the key to its success. If Chinese automakers begin expanding into the US market, Ford could find itself facing competition from the very country it outsourced to. Already, Chinese brands are looking for ways to enter the US. And if Ford's strategy weakens its domestic presence, it could be opening the door for a Chinese takeover of the American EV market. But Ford's biggest challenge might not come from China. It could come from its biggest enemy in Washington. Will Trump's policies force Ford to backtrack? If Ford thought it could outsource production without political consequences, it's severely miscalculated. Donald Trump's response has been nothing short of brutal. And he's not done yet. From the moment Ford made its announcement, Trump declared war on the automaker, calling for nationwide boycotts, tariffs, and penalties on companies that outsource American jobs. Unlike in previous years, Trump now has the full power of the presidency behind him, which means he can directly influence policies that could force Ford to reverse course. One of Trump's biggest threats is the introduction of heavy tariffs on automakers that produce vehicles overseas but sell them in the United States. If implemented, these tariffs could severely cut into Ford's profits, making outsourcing financially unfeasible. Beyond tariffs, Trump's influence over American consumers is massive. His boycott campaign against Ford has already led to declining brand loyalty among conservative buyers, particularly in states like Michigan, Texas, and Ohio, areas that Ford depends on for its truck and SUV sales. If Ford's core customer base turns against it, the company could be in serious trouble. There's also the risk of state-level backlash. Republican-led states could retaliate against Ford by pulling state-level incentives, tax breaks, or subsidies, making it harder for the company to operate profitably in the US. So the big question remains, can Ford withstand the pressure, or will it be forced to backtrack on its outsourcing decision? But even if Ford holds its ground, the ultimate question still stands, was this decision a stroke of genius? Or did the company just make its biggest mistake ever? So, what do you think? Did Ford just outplay Trump, or did it make a massive mistake? Will this move secure its future or hand over the industry to China? Drop a comment below and let us know.